Welcome to the Soulful Surgeon Podcast with Dr. Lisa Hunsicker, a sanctuary for healthcare workers. In this space, we honor your stories, your struggles, and your triumphs. Here, you are more than your role. You are seen, heard, and celebrated. Join me as we explore conversations that nourish the heart, elevate the mind, and remind us why we chose the path of healing. This is your time. This is your place. This is the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Hunsicker. This is the place where healthcare workers come to be seen and heard. Now, today, I want to continue our discussion on the 7 Remedies of Being. And these are all the things that we really focus on with healthcare workers. And these are all the things that I feel like we need to pay attention and really focus our energy to help us be human beings and not doing machines. Now, as you all recall, the first 4 really are about who we are, and that's our physical being, our mental being, our spiritual being, and our sensory being. The next 2 have to do with how we deal with other people. It's our relation being, what are the relationships that we have with other folks, and then our community being, how we interact within our community. And finally, the 7th one is this is really looking at our intentions and what do we want to do with the rest of our life. Now, today I want to focus on the relational being. And this is a really vast thing that I don't think we really think about. And there's someone that we have the most intimate relationship with and we spend the most time with but give the least effort on, and that's ourselves. So, what I want to think about is, what is the relationship that we have? How do we feel about ourselves? How do we talk about ourselves in our own mind? Not really talking about necessarily with other people, how we promote ourselves, because in many cases, especially if we're in private practice, we do have to promote ourselves, and that can be in various ways, whether it's social media or marketing. But really, when we sit in our own skin and we think about who we are, what's the conversation that we're having with ourselves, and how self critical are we? And I really do feel like, y- you know, when we have something that goes wrong, what is the self talk that we do in our mind? And how much is that really affecting, what, how we're showing up, right? Because how we treat ourselves is really going to be how we show up with other people, because there's all this underlying talk that we're really focused on. And so I think we have to give us a lot of space and a lot of priority. And also I think we have to give ourselves a lot of grace, because we're human, we're going to make mistakes, and we're not perfect. And we've talked about this. Perfectionism is excellence without the ability to breathe or pivot. And we don't want that. We want to give ourselves grace, and we want to give ourselves room to be flexible, because sometimes things, well, they just occur outside of like what we would expect in the situation. And that can be in our practice, that could be with our patients, that could be with our families. So we want to be very flexible with that. I think, as I said before, I love Jamie Kern Lima's, book Worthy, and you are first, you are enough, you are worthy. And I think that's really the thing that we've got to focus on, and having that self-talk over and over and doing loving things for ourselves. That's the relationship that really is going to affect how we're showing up with other people. And I think the people that are going to be the most exposed to how well or how poorly we are in the relationship with ourselves is our significant other. And, this can be, if you're single, this might be someone special that you're spending time with. And then certainly if you're coupled up, a significant other that you've been with for a while, it may be a spouse. So, those are the people who really know us the best, or at least we hope so, right? And how are we showing up for them? And when we're not taking care of ourselves, we're going to be tired. That's going to be physical and emotional. And, they need to hear from us. And we need to be able to give them a decent rundown, right, of our day. And certainly nobody wants all the gruesome details. And I'm married to a trauma surgeon. And so, we need the short excerpt from our day for each of us. We don't need to rehash the entire day, but there is this unloading that occurs with close relationships regarding, what has happened during the day. And I feel like we have to really spend some time with them focused on giving them some information that lets them know how our day was. We don't need to burden them with all of the excessive details. And a lot of those details may be very toxic or horrifying in some cases, especially in the healthcare community that works in the emergency department and trauma and OB-GYN perhaps. So, labor delivery can be quite scary at times too. So these are things that we're dealing with. And I think, we walk around with a shield. And I talk about this a lot of having heartfelt and heart-led leadership. And so when we show up to these difficult situations, we need to have a shield up, right? We have to protect our heart. We can't roll in with a soft underbelly because this is something really traumatic that needs to be dealt with. And this can be in a leadership role, this can be in surgery, this can be in dealing with patients or their families or whatever. But you need to have a shield from that. But you also, when you're done with that encounter is not yours. That was whatever you were dealing with. That's that encounter. That's not yours to take. And we have all this residue that we have that we keep on ourselves. And the thing is, we've got to cleanse that out. So, the first thing is we have to put the shield down. Now, if we don't do that, you get shield after shield after shield after shield, and that basically equates to a wall. And then that becomes a habit. And then when we show up for our significant others, there's a wall always. And so it's always there because it's become our habit. And I feel like we have to really work on breaking these walls down because for many of us, I've been in medicine 30 years and there are walls up that are so ingrained, you know exactly where they are and you feel very comfortable in those places. But the people who are the closest to us that we want to have relationships with, they don't understand that. And they can't get up over the wall. We know all the intricacies and the ins and outs of the walls because we built them, but these are the people who are coming in contact with us. So we really have to think about, we have to deconstruct these walls and carry our shields, right? Carry them, use them when appropriately. But when we're done, we need to connect back to our own self. We need to connect back to our spouses and our loved ones. And then we need to let all that go away and move on and be very heartful and very heart led in moving forward. Now, the same thing is similar with our kids. And I think this is a relationship that I don't think we ever talk about, right? Because, we talk about children, it's more about who they are, what they do, and what we have to do for them and where we have to get them to. Well, I've got to get them to the soccer game and I have to get them to school and we have this project. And in many cases, our discussion about who these children are to us are things that we have to do. And perhaps maybe some cases, some of us don't even do that. They have a significant other, a spouse, a hired person to help out with that as well who are doing these things. So again, we have these barriers that we have time, we have space, we have walls and shields that keep us away from our children. And we think that our children can't understand what's going on. And, even when they're very little, they want what they want, right? They're toddlers. And so they're not going to understand, look, I've got to stay here, I've got to do this. But we can put little tiny words to them in moments of stress and times that they understand. They understand owies of all types, right? and little ones. Now, I can think about a time when, gosh, our son was probably not quite 2, and it was Christmas. And I was off, which was great. I was home, and the phone rings, and it turns out I have a patient. One of my mastectomy patients has got a postoperative hemorrhage, and it's actually a really big one. And I'm on the phone, I'm coordinating ambulance care because it really is a big deal, and the drains are just pouring, and she is just bleeding like crazy. So we're trying to get her to the hospital. And so I have to take her emergently to the OR. And I announced to the family, and everyone's there, I'm so sorry, I have to go. And you know, they don't understand. What they understand is it's Christmas and we're all supposed to be home being together. And you said, right, you said you were going to be there, and now you're breaking your promise because you said something, but now you're saying something different, and it doesn't match. So there's going to be anger on their part and grief. And of course, they're young, and so they don't have the ability to understand. And my 2-year-old just, he threw himself on the ground, like on the ground. And you've seen Kai, right? He's a grown fella now. You've seen him in the other interview with that we did on the podcast with Life with Dr. Parents. So he's a big guy now. But at that time, he was 2, and he throws himself on the ground and he's screaming, no, that's not fair. That's not fair. It's Christmas and you said you would be home. That's not fair. And I sat with him. Now, mind you, I need to go. I mean, let's go time. And I don't have a time for a dissertation, but I sit him down and I look him in the eye and I say, look, son, I love you very much and I'm going to be right back. But somebody else's mommy is dying and I need to go so that the other kiddo, their mommy can come home to them. And so I have to go. And that kind of placated him, right? And so I didn't have to give a whole bunch of deal of a really big, expansive explanation to this 2-year-old who can't understand anyway what's about to happen. He just knows that his mom is leaving and she promised she was going to stay and he wants me to be there. But now I've given him something that his little brain can understand, which is there's another little boy who his mom isn't going to come home if I don't go help take care of her. And he understands that little tidbit. There was another time when I was operating, and again, it was another late evening. And usually, the routine, I would try and take him to bed and tuck him into bed. And he was a little bit older. He probably was about 5. And I'm in the OR and we're dealing with this unexpected emergent case. And it's not as tense as the other one where the patient was bleeding, but this was an emergent case that we had to deal with. And so everything is kind of humming along in the OR, and it's about 9:30. And at that time, we didn't have Bluetooth, and the phone was connected into the speaker system so that there was music playing, and the phone rings, and all of a sudden there's this 5-year-old, coming through because it's a good night call. And the idea was they were just going to call and hear my voicemail and then they could leave a message. But the nurse hit the answer phone because they saw that it was my home number, and just to make sure there wasn't a problem. But because it was connected, it went into this big booming system over top of the OR table, and everyone in the OR can hear this. And all of a sudden, like, I'm operating and the music stops because of the call coming in, and all of a sudden there is this 5-year-old's voice booming over my head, and we're all there, and it's like, mama, where are you? And I was like, I'm surprised, right? And all the staff, right? They're parents. Everyone's got kids. Everyone knows this experience about having to leave your kid, and you can't be in the parent role. You've got to be in the caretaker role. And that's the trade-off that we do. But in that moment, I could do both, and I could do it very gently I didn't need to explain what was going on. He had no idea. And again, I just said, I am so sorry. I'm taking care of someone's mommy right now, but I'll be home to tuck you in. And if you snuggle up and go to bed, I'll see you and I'll wake you up when I get home. But right now I have to take care of someone's mommy. And he has the context, right, from other previous times where he understands. And so that whole conversation, instead of being a temper tantrum, turns into, okay, mama, I love you. Wake me up when you get home. Okay. And everyone in the room, right? All of the nurses, anesthesia, me, like everyone's ready to cry, right? Because all we want to do, we love this little baby, right? We just want to be with them. But I've created a way that this little kiddo can understand where I'm at, what I'm doing, that I love them, and that I'll get to them as soon as possible. And if I have walls, and if I have all this shielding all the time, then maybe my response is, who answered that phone? Why is it over my head? And why is this happening? And then I go home and I'm mad at my spouse who the phone call, the 5-year-old didn't get my phone and just dial it. Somebody else had, get him on the phone. And then the nurse answered the call. I mean, there's so many layers of anger that I can just reach out to. And in that moment, I can have 30 seconds because this is not a 911 moment. Okay, I can be present and I can respond to this kiddo. And these are the pieces that we build over the years to be able to do that. And I think that it's it's something that they learn who we are. And the problem is that in many cases, they learn, well, my mom or my dad, my brother, my sister, my son, my daughter, my kid, well, they're a doctor, they're a nurse, they're whatever role that they have. And so it's a title, but they've no idea who we are and what we do. And we protect them and we shield ourselves from that. And so, you know, how did they feel about what we do? Do they even know what we do? And how do they feel about this title? But more importantly, do they know what that title means? And what does that resonate when they're sitting there talking to their friends about who we are as people? Who are they? I have a colleague, and she came home, and the nannies were, excuse me, it was a single nanny. The 3 kids were there, and they're having a conversation. And for some reason, the kiddos ended up talking about death. And so the nanny's in this very interesting position to try and explain death to these 3 little girls. And so as my colleague comes in, and she's in the background, right? No one knows that she's there yet. And she's listening to this conversation to see how the nanny responds, how the kids are all talking. And the little one says to the other 2, do you think we would notice if mommy died? And that was so incredibly powerful, right? So, what does it mean when you sit there and you watch your kids say, do you think we would even notice if our mom was dead? Like, clearly they got the message of what death was, and that that person would never be in front of them again. Even as little kids, they could understand that. But what does that mean when you, as the parent, they don't even know if you're going to be there? So this was very profound to her, and she actually changed her practice quite a bit. And this has reframed her entire practice and her whole relationship with her family. And the thing is, do we have to get to those moments in order to realize those things? Or is it just plain and simple, like, look, this is what we're doing and we're not showing up and we have to be present for our family? I just had a conversation earlier this week, and I am taking care of the wife of another surgeon. And the thing is, she is struggling with her teenager. And the teenage daughter just keeps saying, I don't even know who dad is. And so here's the thing. Are we all on our phones all the time? They're on their phones, we're on our phones, and we're working all day, we're seeing patients all day, but then we have all the emails and all the staff emails and all the prescriptions and all the charting. I mean, it's just, we're attached to electronics all day long, and we're not separating from that, and we're not being in a space with our loved ones. And again, this is our parents, our children, our spouses and loved ones, and our siblings, and even our very close friends in our core circle. So what ends up happening is this wall is so big, and we keep alienating people more and more and more. And so now this is how we're functioning, and this is in our own like personal internal world. This is our relationship with us, our relationship with our families and our core circle. But now we have to show up for patients, and really what's the role that we're going to play with these patients, and how do we show up in all the fears that we have and all of the emotions that we have, and we're tired. I mean, there's been mornings I've come to work when my son was young. We're just trying to get him to daycare and making me late to the OR. Like he didn't understand. He's a butterfly. But I would come and I'd be so upset. And so then all the people that I would be working with, my colleagues in the OR, or I'd be in clinic, and the patients would see me. And then this is where I show up with. And really what I need to do is I need to be very present with them, and I need to hear them, and I need to see them. They also need to hear me, and they need to see me, but my job is really to kind of figure out what their needs are and give them the best care as possible. But what are the emotions that I'm bringing towards them? Is it leftovers from my family? Am I mad at them because they're having a complication? And I know they could do better, but maybe they're not doing as much for themselves. Maybe they're going completely against what I recommend, and I've told them this would happen. They've done it anyway. They have a problem, and now they're upset, and I'm having to listen to it. But that's my role, right? This is what we do. And how much are we doing that is fear based, right? We are always, always in fear of being sued. And so every time you show up, you've got the judge here and the jury here, and you've got the attorneys here of like, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. And everything that you're doing is about charting and covering yourself so that if you go to court and this person's angry at you, that you can defend yourself, and you're not even going to remember because maybe it was a year ago and you don't even remember the conversation, but that patient was one patient, in that moment. So it's 100% because they had one doctor appointment and they're very focused on what you're saying. But, in your day, in your week, in your month, in your year, there's thousands of patients, and it's all just blurring together because it's so much volume. But how does that fear of being sued affect your behavior with the patient? And I think this is something that we really have to talk about. And we have to talk about this with patients. And the patients have to understand this. And also everyone else who is involved in healthcare, the hospitals, the third party providers, our legislators, the people who make rules, the people who make HIPAA, all of these things. There's so many people making decisions about this person's care that is not even you. And we have to start talking about that, because this fear-based approach coming in with all of these other issues that we're just coming in with all these bags to see these patients, and they're late, and now I'm late, and all these things are late, and I'm going to be late for this meeting, and I have to give this talk, and I'm going to be in front of these people, but I'm really nervous. I mean, it just spirals and spirals and spirals. And so you can go down this rabbit hole, and this poor patient has come to see you about whatever their concern is, but they're walking into a room with so much more. And we know this because when we sit down, the patients are coming with so much more, and that's our job to navigate. So I really want to pay attention to that. So I just, and I invite patients to consider this too. How do you think healthcare workers would feel, and how do you think that we would act if we knew that we were never going to be sued? And I'm not talking about accountability and responsibility, because that is number one. We have to do that. But really, like internally, write in the comments. Put where, wherever you're at, and put whatever type of medical professional that you are, and put in there what it would feel like to you. I want you to really think about, if lawsuits completely went away, close your eyes. Just think about right now what it would be like if there were no more lawsuits, and there was no more CYA. And so you could just be, and you could show up and be with patients and just do whatever it is that you needed to do to deliver the best care for that person in that moment, whatever they needed. Take a moment, think about that. And then write in the comments, what what would that feel like to you? And what would that mean to you? Because I think this is important for all of us to communicate with each other about how this would feel, because I really do feel like this would make a huge change for us. Now, I think that we've talked about these issues, and now what are we going to do that is going to make an impact in all of these relationships? Well, we need to show up for us. We've got to take care of our physical being, we've got to take care of our mental being, got to take care of our spiritual being, and our sensory being. All those things have to be in a working order, and that comes first, right? We are worthy, we are enough, and we can do this. And we can't show up and be of any value to anyone else when we're not at our best. So I want to focus on that, but then show up for your family and friends and make a commitment to get there. And the phones and all of the electronics, they have to go away. And when you're sitting at the fifth game of the day, put it down, because you all know more than anyone else, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and something can happen. And then that little one is not there tomorrow, or you're not there, or your spouse is not there, or your mom's not there, or this is the last birthday that we have together. We know more than anyone, because of the kind of work that we do, that life is not guaranteed for tomorrow. And so we have to be present, because that might be the last bit that we have. And it's very interesting. I was listening to a podcast with Patrice Washington, and we were we were really listening. Sunil Boom was on there, and they were talking about parents and aging parents. And this really, really affected me. And I want you to think about this, because, my folks, my dad is 85. My mom is a few years younger. I'm not going to say, because she'll get mad at me. She's super young, right, Mom? So, but nonetheless, so if you're seeing your parents annually, right? And for me, I try and talk to them a couple times a week. We FaceTime a fair amount too, because I like the video connection with them, but being present. But one thing that Sunil said, and when he was talking with Patrice Washington, it was, well, I just did the math, right? Because so if I see them once a year, and my dad lives for 5 years, 10 years, then it means I'm going to see my dad 5 more times in this lifetime. And all of a sudden was like, what is happening? Right. And so, in that podcast, they really talk about, like, he just picked up and he moved to be closer to his family, and he changed his life to work around that, because that was something that was really important. And, for me, literally after I hung up, on that podcast and watching that podcast, we sat down and we made a plan, and we have seen both of our parents, and now we have a more active plan, because these are important. And we just have to show up and not be connected to our job. And that's the hard part, because we're all on call, but we have to work around that. And the thing too is that we have to hire people. And this is something that's really difficult, or we have to combine with our core group of, it takes a village to do all of these things. And so we have to reach out to our village, but also hire out. get people to do the things that you don't physically have to do, so that takes some of those things off your plate so you can get to these events, get to the weddings, get to the funerals, get to the soccer games, get to all the things. And as you saw in the conversation with, you know, parents as physicians with Dr. Jody Widener and Dr. Radhika Acharya, and I know this for myself, we all sat down with our kids and said, look, we can't be at every single game because of the kind of work that we do, but I want to look at your schedule and I need you to tell me what are the most important ones that if you had to pick half, what are the ones that you would want me there for? And that way they have some say over it, because all of a sudden you don't have to worry about all this extra stuff, but you can just keep your work and your relationships all balanced. They know that you're trying to get to them and you've had a relationship with them, so they understand the kind of work that you do, so that they're flexible and they're not going to get everything that they want. And that can't happen. It's just not possible. And we don't have that kind of flexibility. And we have a lot more responsibility than many people do in their jobs. And so I think we just have to have this conversation with them and just choose to be present with them. And we have to be there physically and mentally. And we have to talk to them. Like, we have to show them that we have paid attention and talk about the things that happen, so that they think that we are watching them, because they need to be seen. They need to be heard and felt and understood. And so after that game, you sit and you talk about how the game was. And when they're looking over and you've come over there, but you're on your phone, that tells them you might as well not even come. So we have to choose these relationships every single day. Now, the next thing is, our patients. And we have to start figuring this out. And I don't know the path to this, and I just, I make it up as I go every single day. And my patients, they sit in front of me, and I try to be a human in front of me. And I'll have to tell you, it's been used against me, because there's times where literally we've had a conversation and we've asked about, well, what'd you do last night? Or how was your weekend? So it's just friendly talk. And then later, when they're angry, it's well, she only cares about her race car driving, or she was more concerned with her diving and going on vacation. And these are the words that get weaponized against us. And I think we have to start doing a better job in working on these relationships with these patients, because they feel disconnected from us. But then when we give them something, right, we're pulling the shield down, we're being present with them, and then we're giving them a little bit of us as well, where, we've been taught, you don't give anything, right? That's just, there's the barrier, and you're there for them and they're not going to get anything from you, and they feel disconnected. But then, we let that shield down, then these things become weaponized. And I think this is something that we have to work on as a community. And I think we need to work on with our patients. And and this happens, right, with all people we know. And it's not just our patients, there are people who are friends that we have an intimate discussion. And in many cases, not an intimate discussion. It's about, are you excited to go on vacation, Doc? I know, I understand you're going to wherever. Are you excited about that? I went there. Let me tell you about the great things that happened with my wife and I. So maybe when you go, right? It's a real conversation with real people, but that can be weaponized against you, and that can happen whether it's a patient or any of your friends. And we have to understand that we have to be careful with that. But I feel like if we let them see us as people, I don't like to wear my white coat in. Probably the only time that I wear my coat is to and from the hospital, because it's basically a purse for all my stuff in it. But when I go and I see patients on the wards, they like for me to have the coat because they know who I am. And people who don't know who I am, they still know that I'm a surgeon coming up to see my patients or see a consult. So that's helpful. But other than that, my interaction with patients, I don't wear the coat, because I really want to come face to face with them, I'm not talking down to them. In many cases, I'm talking either aligned with them or they're sitting on their exam table or the exam chair, and I'm sitting on a stool. I'm sitting lower, so they're actually looking down to me. So I'm coming down. I'm not in this. I don't know. I don't want to be this paternalistic approach of like, I'm here to tell you what to do. I'm your partner in medicine and I'm going to give you all the information, but ultimately it's their decision to do with whatever they want to do with the information that you give them. Right. And so you have to make them comfortable and be in those places. But tell them something about you. Let them know something about you. And it's interesting because in my world, my patients I see annually, especially my breast cancer patients, and so they come in for annuals, and so I'm constantly checking and keeping up with them. This is a relationship much like even a primary care, but in many of these cases they've had multiple primary care physicians, but I've been the only surgeon who's taking care of them from a cancer standpoint and their reconstruction for 20 years. And so they know me. How's your son? Is he in college now? What is he studying? Did he decide to do medicine? Is he doing business? Is he doing whatever? What is his interest? And so, like, you have that. So then they feel connected to you. So you can have these conversations. You can make the impact that you want to because they trust you and they know that you care about them and they know who they are. I think that creating this is going to benefit the both of you. I think you're going to get better relationships with them and you're going to feel better because you're looking forward to seeing people. Now, here's the thing, they're always going to be the people that you know who are coming in that maybe you don't like, but they deserve to have the best of you. And it's okay. You don't have to like everybody. And it's that way with our friends. It's that way that with maybe even your family. You don't have to like and love everybody, but you do have to show up in a way that is authentic to you and authentic to them to give you both the best experience. Because ultimately, if you keep doing this over and over and over again, and it's this adversarial approach for the both of you, then we come away, we're angry, we don't do the right thing by patients because we're just pissed and we're hurt and we're angry and we're tired. And they're mad because they don't feel like they really are heard and that people are understand and that we even care. And I feel like we care more than patients understand. The fact that we walk in the door many times is a big effort for some of us. And that alone says that we care, but they don't know all of this that has occurred before we walked in the door. And when we walk in the door to see them, they don't know the other numbers of people that we've seen and what that is. And if you saw in my first podcast, going from a dying patient into a woman who is mad at me because I'm late, because I'm taking care of a dying patient because I have to get rid of her wrinkle, right? It's so difficult, but we have to be able to navigate that in a way, and we have to be able to process it. I think that there are going to be some people that you're going to serve that you're not going to want to do this. And it's hard. It's not because you don't like the people. In many cases, you don't even know the people. So it has nothing to do with that, but it's really hard work. The emergency department, think interventional radiology, trauma services, labor and delivery services, all of those people where they're dealing with intense situations that simply can arrive on your doorstep. I think these are very difficult. And again, these shields that we put up, we have to. But the thing is that we have to be able to have these conversations with the family and the friends of the patients who are there, and also the patients themselves, if they're even able in the position to have a conversation, to be present. And the more that we do this, the more that we talk about this, it begins to disseminate. People understand this. And we need to start talking about this with all of our family and friends and more publicly, because I was in a situation where I was discussing all of these things. And it was with a group of people that were not medical at all. And they had no idea. And I just said, look, when you're in the ER, you don't know when that healthcare provider has walked in, what room they just walked out of and what's happened. And there may be a child who has just died and they're walking into your room, or there's someone who is in the process of dying. Maybe it's a child, maybe it's someone else, right? But it's still a dire situation. But when you walk in as a provider, you can't come in and just be telling everyone's business that's going on in the ED. But by telling some of these people in these very short snippets and very soft terms, I did this. And so when I came back a couple weeks later, they said, Lisa, this is an interesting thing. I listened to your talk about this. We had this conversation a couple weeks ago. And as it turns out, my mom had to go to the ER and she was having a problem. And we were there and we had to wait. And she was getting really angry and she was getting upset and she didn't want to wait. And so here's the thing, you don't know what's going on in all these other rooms. And I said to my mom, hey, look, Mom, you don't know what's going on in all these other rooms. And maybe there's something that is just a little bit more time sensitive in these other rooms than what's going on here. And she kind of gave the position and the perspective that we had talked about to her mother, right? I didn't even have to do that. It's this ripple effect that goes. And the mom was okay. And when the physician finally came in, he was just wiped. And he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I kept you waiting. And this gal who had listened to my conversation a few weeks earlier said, no, doctor, thank you so much for coming. We know that there's so much going on out there. We have no idea what you've been through, but we're so glad that you're here. Thank you. And the whole demeanor of the physician changed. And so did the nursing staff that was with him, because everyone was braced for an angry, hostile encounter. And they took care of that themselves. And then they reassured the medical team, and the medical team just relaxed. And they were able to just like take a breath of like, okay, now I can do this and I can be present for you. And what's going on? What can I do for you today? What's the issue? So that was a way that a patient actually took care of the ED staff. So these are some of the things that we can be doing. I think one of the things that we know that happens, and this is something that we need to talk about to everyone. I don't know how you all feel. I know that I get upset when I walk in to the hospital, and this isn't all the hospitals. This isn't one particular one, and it's not in a bad part of the neighborhood kind of hospital. No, this is every single hospital all throughout this country. There are signs that we have to put in the front doors to instruct patients that they cannot assault us. I mean, you talk to the healthcare workers, they're being bit, they're being hit, they're being spit on, they're being assaulted. And so we need to make sure there's enough security in the emergency department, on the wards, and quick response. The teams need to be protected. But most importantly, we have got to start showing this to the public, because we cannot keep getting assaulted. And we show up day after day after day in order to take care of patients, and we're being assaulted. We're being physically assaulted. We're being emotionally assaulted and verbally abused day in and day out. And that happens, and we're just supposed to take it and, well, it's just the patient. Now, here's the thing. We know patients can be psychotic or they can be impaired in some way. And that's the state. And we realize that as healthcare workers, and we deal with that. But the thing is, when we have people who are sober, who are not impaired, and especially family members who come in and assault all of the healthcare teams and are hateful and pejorative and physical and threatening to us, we can't do our jobs. We don't want to do our jobs. We don't even want to be with you. And so we need to start having these conversations, because this needs to become more public and it just needs to stop. And I know that every time I go to the OR and I pass the sign that says, you cannot assault our staff, it puts me in a mind frame of like, I'm ready. It's go time for me to be present for this patient. But this is the reminder every day that we're being assaulted and no one is taking care of us. No one cares, and it just keeps happening. So we have to figure out, we have to work with hospitals, we have to work with security, and we have to work with the public and start showing this stuff, because it's got to stop. Now, lastly, I want to talk about, like, what are your limiting beliefs and what do you think is possible? And I think a lot of us are programmed to think a certain way because this is how we've been trained, but what are you willing to lose? And I love Patrice Washington and the Redefining Wealth podcast, because that's a core in that podcast, which is, what are you willing to lose? And it's not necessarily relationships or jobs or physical things. It may be a belief in what's possible. And for me, one of my limiting beliefs was that I had to be perfect. And if I wasn't perfect, then I wasn't even worth being a human being and a physician and showing up to these people. I was nothing. And so we have to get out of these limiting beliefs. And so I want you to think about that and maybe even put it down in the comments. What is a limiting belief that you have? And maybe in regards to that, what is something in that belief that you might be willing to lose? Or what is another variation of that might actually be more beneficial to you and beneficial to all your relationships? And finally, to close, and we're doing this in a digital format. Digital. Everything is digital. Our whole world is digital. Our charts are digital. Everything is digital. Our communication is digital. But it's really difficult to have a relationship when it's one person. And so we have these people that we're trying to connect to. Do it in person as much as you can. Put the electronics down. Stay off of social media. Stay off of all these other things and just go be present, because this is the only way people are going to know us. And we're on social media as part of our job. We're present on all the electronics. And we just need to stop that for a short time when we're with the people that we care about, so they know who we are, because that matters. So if this podcast resonated with you and you know someone in healthcare you think this would be beneficial for, please share that with them. I think we have to keep coming together. Our next episode we're going to talk about is community. And I think that all of us are in a very large community. We need to reach out and be present for one another. So thank you very much, and be well. Thank you for joining me on the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. I hope today's conversation offered you reflection, encouragement, and a reminder that you are not alone on this journey. If this episode spoke to your heart, please share it with someone who might need it as well. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of connecting with healthcare workers all over. You can find us on the web at soulfulsurgeon.com. You can find us on Instagram at Soulful Surgeon. And you can find us on LinkedIn at Lisa Hunsicker, MD. Until next time, take care of yourself the way you care for others. And remember, your story matters here.